Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
The New York Giants are gearing up for their first preseason game, and fans hoping this is the year it's going to be different. I got some bad news. We're going to talk some Giants on this episode. We'll talk it over with Giants beat reporter Jordan Raanan right now on Gordon Damer on Sports. Hey, welcome back in. Fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports, episode number 31. Lots to get into today, and we're talking some football. Looking ahead to the New York Giants season, and we'll get some details on the team and where they're at in training camp with Jordan Raanan, who, of course, covers the Giants for ESPN. He's got the Breaking Big Blue podcast. But look, it's that time of year. Football is right around the corner. That means optimism is in the air, even for Giant fans after all they've gone through. And I wanted to use this podcast episode as just kind of another side of things, because I got to be honest, I don't know what the heck Giant fans are talking about with their optimism. Because looking up and down the roster, looking up and down everything, I don't see it. Now look, there was a time, Giant fans, I think, remember it a little too well, that this franchise was the gold standard, right? Stable, disciplined, successful. From Parcells to Coughlin, from LT to Strahan, Eli, the Giants were the model organization. And they didn't just win, they did it the right way. Front office, stability, homegrown talent, championships. And what they've become, they have become a punchline. They are an absolute clown show. Has any organization fallen harder than the Giants over the last decade? They're a team that's gone from pride and history and championships to the worst team in football since 2017. That's a while ago now, 2017. They have the worst record in the sport, worse than the Jets. I didn't think that was possible, but I did the math a couple of times. It is. So as we head into the 2025 season, I don't really see how much has changed, even with all this bad football. So this is a critical year for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. There's no other way to put it. And the first thing when I think of those two guys is, I think, how the heck did they keep their jobs? I think it's only because the owner has been tired of firing people after every 2 years. I mean, what else could it possibly be? It's not progress. So as soon as last year ended and John Mara came out with that statement saying we're running it back, the one that included the amazing line, we felt it necessary to make this statement. Yes, it was necessary, because after what we've seen on the football field in terms of results, ordinarily you would think that means a coaching change, a GM change. But that has not been the case. So apparently what they put out there was enough to keep their jobs for another year. But Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, the fact that they're back for year 4, if year 4 looks anything like year 3, there will not be a year 5. This is a must-win season for both of them. And John Mara said all as much when he said that he's just about out of patience. So this is must-win time. Now, I'm not thinking playoffs, but I think they have to win a sizable amount of games, 8, 9 games. And when you take a look at it, it's hard to envision. Take a look at the quarterbacks, because this regime, Joe Schoen specifically, at every step of the way, they have failed at quarterback. And you could say, with all the mistakes that he's made, the biggest one, re-signing Daniel Jones. That one, when the story is written about the Joe Schoen time with the Giants, that contract, 4 years, $160 million, that was a disaster then. And I think it's the biggest mistake that he made, because it influenced so many other decisions along the way, right? Like as soon as he got that contract, he was hurt again. He was ineffective. I think last year he was 2-8, got benched for Tommy DeVito. That was the first mistake of many. And basically every decision at quarterback the Giants have made has been wrong. From Jones to Drew Lock to passing on the quarterbacks, one mistake after another mistake. So when John Mara came out last season and said what he said, you knew what was coming. You knew without a shadow of a doubt the Giants were going to draft a quarterback in the first round and hit that big reset button. And that is exactly what they did. They traded back into the first round. It was the most telegraphed move of the draft, that they were going to draft someone late in the first round, and that person was Jaxson Dart. Now, is Dart the answer? I don't know. Based on the previous answers, I would think probably not. But make no mistake, what that move was not about they identified something special about Jaxson Dart. That move was about saving their jobs. And the mistakes at quarterback. The other thing about the Drew Lock move, he not only stunk, that canceled out the compensatory pick you would have got for letting Saquon Barkley walk. So you want to talk about poor asset management. That is a textbook example, and that is right at the feet of Joe Schoen. So if I would have told you when Joe Schoen got the job that heading into year 4, the Giants starting quarterback would have been Russell Wilson, what would you have said? You wouldn't have been happy, I can tell you that. You would not be optimistic. But this is what desperate GMs do. This quarterback room looks like it was thrown together by people shouting out names playing Pictionary, right? Jameis Winston, Jaxson Dart. And all of that stems from the first decision, that foundational mistake of re-signing Daniel Jones to a contract as a franchise quarterback when it was clear he was not one. So now here we are, year 4, and the Giants, I don't think still have a quarterback that you can feel good about. Jameis Winston's not the answer, right? But yet Russell Wilson is. Russell Wilson, I think at this stage is only slightly better than Winston. Like, think about it. The Steelers had Russell Wilson and were more than happy to let him walk so they could get Aaron Rodgers. Think about that. Now, the Giants, if the quarterback was the only issue, that would be one thing. But let's move to the roster building under Joe Schoen, because if you thought quarterback decisions were bad, wait until you see the full risk. Go through the draft picks. Since taking over in 2022, he has also not only done a bad job with who he's brought in, who he's let get away. Right? Obviously, the number one guy is Saquon Barkley, who had a record-setting season with the Eagles. That one I'm not so upset about because he would never have been that here. But Xavier McKinney, Julian Love, Evan Ingram, all producing elsewhere. So when you take a look at the resume of Joe Schoen, it seems like a lot of times people look at Brian Daboll for being on the hot seat. Joe Schoen should be right there with them. Think about who he has brought in. Forget about the draft in 2022, which was a flop with Evan Neal and Thibodeau. The free agents, Tyrod Taylor and Jihad Ward and Mark Glowinski, and was Paris Campbell that year? Was he the next year? Bobby McCain, Darren Waller, who retired. Then last year, they made the big splash with Brian Burns, and they're paying not only draft capital, but also a huge contract, and he got 8 sacks. The results didn't seem all that much better. So when people say that Brian Daboll's on the hot seat, and I have no problem with that, Schoen should be right there along with him. Because take a look. Remember when he came in? What was one of the main problems with the Giants? Offensive line. When he walked in the door, that was a problem when Eli Manning was still playing. And here we are, and the offensive line is still a work in progress. Andrew Thomas is good when he's healthy, but he's been inconsistent and has been hurt. I think he's played 16 games the last 2 years. And we're going into a season where you're thinking maybe Evan Neal can be the answer at guard. Now, look, there's some pieces I like. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is fantastic. We'll get into that with Jordan when we talk to him. And I understood the reasoning for passing on a quarterback that year, build up some of the weapons around him so that when you do get the quarterback, he has a chance to succeed. But the skill positions, they're running it back from almost the exact same group as last year. The only difference, it seems like, is Cam Scatterbo. Is that saving the Giants had the 28th ranked offense last season. The Lions scored more points last year than the Giants scored in the last 2 seasons combined, and yet they're running it back? Essentially the same group as they had the year before? It's also an offense that ranked dead last in explosive play. Well, technically they were tied for dead last, so I guess there's a silver lining. Now, Giant fans will point to the defense that it's going to be better. And look, I think that it should be better than the offense, that's for sure. And maybe Abdul Carter will be LT 2.0. But defensively, they still have issues stopping the run. And they last year didn't really stop the pass. They gave 4.6 yards per carry last year. They were dead last in explosive runs allowed. And they had 5 interceptions on the season. 5! In case you were wondering, yes, that was also 31st in the NFL. And it doesn't seem, now look, season's a long season. Maybe there'll be some pieces that they added. Javon Holland, from my time in Miami, I think he's a good player. I don't think he's necessarily a game changer. But they have a lot of holes for an organization that has had the same people in place now going into year 4. And as if that was not all, as that was not enough for a bad season. They enter the season. I don't know how this is possible. Ask Jordan. They have the hardest schedule in the league. Now, I usually don't get worked up about schedules because a lot changes in the course of the year, but the Giants need all the breaks they can get. Unfortunately, the Giants can't play the Giants. They got 10 games against playoff teams from a year ago. The first 8 weeks are absolutely brutal. Commanders, Cowboys, Chiefs, the first 3. And look, the last 2 seasons, they opened the year with an absolute flop. The last 2 years combined, they've lost 2 games by a combined score of 68-6. And if that happens this year, if they start 0-2, 0-3, then the spiraling really begins. Because if you're not winning games with Russell Wilson, you know what's going to be. The screams are going to be get Jaxson Dart in there, whether he's ready or not. So, look, let's get back this to where we began before we talk to Jordan. The one real constant in this, it's not Brian Daboll, it's not Joe Schoen, it's John Mara. John Mara is the guy who hired Pat Shurmur or hired Joe Judge or put Dave Gettleman in charge. And now he's the guy that he says that he's, about out of patience. Well, I'm a big believer patience is overrated. Patience was not the problem with Joe Judge or Pat Shurmur or Dave Gettleman. The problem is any lack of progress, which you would think would be easy from where they were coming from the worst run team for the last decade. John Mara is the owner of that. So if you're out of patience, I would say do something, right? So look, maybe I'm being overly negative. Maybe I'm wrong on Jaxson Dart. Maybe Russell Wilson turns back the clock. Maybe this roster is better than I think and it overachieves. Maybe some of the bounces go their way like they did year 1 under Brian Daboll. Maybe this season will be a miracle. But make no mistake, that's what it'll take, a miracle, for them to have jobs beyond this year. And sure, there was a time not that long ago, the Giants, they were the place for miracles, right? David Tyree or Mario Manningham, Eli in July. I'm just not sure that I would be counting on one for this year. All right, let's talk to Jordan. All right, we're now joined by the host of the Breaking Big Blue podcast, covers the Giants for ESPN, and of course, it's Jordan Raanan, who's nice enough to give us some time here. Jordan, what's going on, pal?
You got it, Gordon. Anytime for you, man. Gordon and Jordan.
There we go. We got it reunited once again. All right.
Yeah, and then we have our cousin, Little Jordy, who's on the Giants now. Little Jordan Humphrey.
Yes, bouncing around the league.
Little Jordan. Yeah, Little Jordy.
I don't know. I don't know that that's going to stick. I don't know. I think the Jordan and Gordon is definitely going to be all right. But
well, for me, like Little Jordan, like that's my cousin.
I gotcha. All right, so let's start with the most important thing right off the bat. Is Malik Nabers going to return first-round value in a 12-team half-point PPR league this year?
Yeah, Malik Nabers is stud. I was saying yesterday after watching him. First of all, I want to see him go against Sauce Gardner next week when the Jets play joint practice of the Giants. But nobody at the Giants can guard him. Like he just makes it easy. Look easy getting open. He's going to catch a ton of passes. He's going to get a ton of targets. I mean, look what he did last year. I think it was like 170. Yeah. And remind you, he missed 2 games. So, but no, this guy's a stud. I think when you look at Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, who else am I missing? There's a third big guy, right?
Amon-Ra. I mean, CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, okay. Well, I honestly think Malik Nabers is in the category. I would probably put, I guess, Jefferson and Chase in a different category by themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think Malik Nabers is right there in that next category below them with the guys you just said, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb. They're a little different. They're more slot guys, so it's hard for me to compare those kind of guys, but we're talking about fantasy value.
Yeah.
But he's going to catch a lot of passes for a lot of yards, get in the end zone. There's really nothing Malik Nabers can't do. So I think he's right around, and my buddy was asking me, where I thought he kind of fit in, and I started looking at it, and I think that's right. He's probably in that like 10 to 12 range. That's pretty much probably where he probably belongs right now.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Giants camp, because obviously there's a lot riding on this year for the coach, for the GM, for everybody in the building. Has there been any noticeable difference, any changes this year to training camp?
Minor things. I think, one of the bigger things is that Mike Kafka's the one calling plays, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's notable because they came out. Remember when John Mara had that press conference, said that Daboll and Shane were coming back?
Right.
Well, at that point, he stood up there and he said, I told Brian, Daboll, I told Brian it's probably a good idea to, allow someone else to do play calling, and this way you can concentrate on being the head coach. So at that point, okay, Brian Daboll might want to call plays, but when the owner says, hey, it's probably best if you don't call plays, you're probably not going to go call plays, right? So now Mike Kafka's back, which is interesting because what a whirlwind, experience this is here. Mike Kafka called it for the first year, called it again the second year, got it pulled a couple times during the second year. Daboll took it over in the third year, and I was back to Mike Kafka in the fourth year. So to me, when I look at that, that's one of the biggest things is that Kafka is basically, it's becoming more of his offense again, a little bit more than it was Brian Daboll. And then you see little tweaks. I think Brian Daboll wants to run a little bit of harder camp, but he's still at his core kind of a softie with this stuff. And guys, there's just a lot of guys sitting out all the time. They're very cautious. You don't know if it's how much of that is medical approach, front office approach, coaching approach, whatever it may be. But the Giants run in general, I think, a pretty, I don't want to say soft camp, but like a pretty liberal, easier camp. If I probably compare it to some others, like I was talking to someone, and they're like, Andy Reid, like his first week of his camp is just brutal. And that's his philosophy. John Harbaugh from that Andy Reid tree, same thing. Whereas you look at Brian Daboll and his camp is definitely not quite to that extent.
Yeah, because I just think like the last 2 years, that season opening game, it did not seem like the Giants were ready to play at all. I was just wondering if maybe this year they had ramped it up, especially with the pressure on everybody in the building.
Yeah, so you say that, and I brought that up. I mean, Kevin O'Connell basically said last year we were more prepared and in better shape than them. And they're like, whoa. And by the way, they whooped them also. So, and remember, at the beginning of the year, everyone thought Minnesota wasn't that good. And they came into MetLife and they just handed it to the Giants. So I asked Brian Daboll at the beginning of the summer that exact question, and he kind of, we made some changes, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at it every day, I don't see that much difference, to be honest with you. Maybe a little bit more live drills. That's right. If anything, that's it. Then I don't see, there's no like extra days, extra work seem to be put in. Some teams, he goes, most teams go, I believe, 4 days on, 1 day off. The Giants are almost always 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off.
All right. So, we talk about let me ask you, how is it possible that the Giants have the hardest schedule in the NFL, right? Like I always hear like, oh, well, they're a last place team, so that's going to be an easier schedule. And then you see this year that the Giants are supposed to have the hardest schedule in the NFL. How is that possible?
It's called luck of the draw, Gordon. I mean, it's their entire division that has the hardest schedules because it's just the way it worked out. It's basically a rotating schedule, right?
Right.
Last year this year they're the AFC West. Last year they were the AFC North, right? Yes. Yeah. Whatever it is. It's just a sliding scale. So you go to a different division each year. This year it just so happens to be in the AFC, the division they have to play is the West. It's a very good division, right? You're talking about the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, the Chargers with Justin Herbert. You're talking about the Raiders who, while about being the worst team, now have Geno Smith and Pete Carroll, and the Broncos, who were an upstart team last year with maybe the best defense in the league. And then in the NFC, instead of playing last year, they played the West. This year they play the NFC North, which, again, might be the toughest division in football. You want to play the NFC South. That's probably the weakest division. But no, they get the NFC North. It's just a rotation. So now they have the Vikings very good, the Packers very good, the Lions excellent, and the worst team in that division happens to be the Chicago Bears. And I think a lot of people think that's a very talented team. They should be pretty good.
Yeah.
And then the one other, like this was just a bad break. You play the people who finished in last place in the other divisions, and one of them happened to be the Saints, which is fine. The Saints, it's the one game they're favored in right now. The Giants, if they've got a spread for every game. And the other one happened to be the San Francisco 49ers got so dinged up and banged up that they finished in last place. So now you play the 49ers as a last place team. We all know the 49ers aren't a last place team. They're super talented. Their whole team got injured. Everything went wrong. But everyone expects them to bounce back to some degree this year. But no, the Giants have to play them too. So it's just luck of the draw. It worked against them. But the division in general, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders, they have most of those same teams. So they also have very, very hard schedules.
It's just crazy to me. Like, what's the expectation around the team for, like, what's a fair expectation? Because as an outsider, I look at the Giants and I'm like, you look at that schedule, you look at where they've been the last few years. Very, very difficult to predict more than, I don't know, 5 wins in a good, trying to be positive and sunny. But it seems like all the talk at camp is that things have a kind of a different vibe. What have you seen being out there around the team?
Well, the one thing they point to, especially, is Russell Wilson and his leadership, Jameis Winston also with his leadership and having those kind of guys in there in that key position. Russell Wilson oozes positivity. I mean, to a point where I can't believe someone's so positive all the time.
Yeah.
But hey, that's his personality. He's convinced himself that's best. And you know what? From a football perspective, it probably is beneficial. So it gives them an idea that they could be good and that he knows what it takes to be successful. They're working on the details. So I think that is the confidence that they have that they haven't had the last few years. And really, the over-under from most places that I've seen is 5.5. Mm-hmm. Low over-under. If they win 7 or 8 games, and they don't think this, but I think most fans that I talk to believe this, if they win 7 or 8 games, this is a really good season. And you can feel good about the season.
Absolutely.
7, 8 games. You have Jaxson Dart do anything, just flash one play, and I think people will feel good about where the Giants are at.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jaxson Dart. Is there any world in which he's the starter here early on, if not week 1? Is there any possible way that happens? I mean, he was a first-round pick.
There's always a world where it could happen, but I think it would have something sort of out of the box would have to happen here. Russell Wilson starting week 1. He's been the best quarterback at training camp, by the way, too. So you see the difference between a seasoned veteran, even if Russell Wilson isn't what he used to be, and a rookie who's learning. The ups and downs with Jaxson Dart, you see it constantly, right? Like, it would benefit him to sit and wait. I totally agree with that, and I totally see that. And I think Jameis Winston's actually there as a contingency. So you don't have to throw Jaxson Dart into the fire unnecessarily super early in the season, right? Like, what if Russell Wilson, like last year, hurts his calf and has to miss the first 6 games of the year? You don't want to have to throw Jaxson Dart in there. Maybe the offensive line isn't in the greatest shape in the world. You're playing a super tough schedule, to get his teeth kicked in. So, you can then wait. And if you think about it, Mike Kafka, who is the offensive coordinator, when he was in Kansas City, one of his jobs, especially that year, I think he was the quarterback's coach, he was in charge of Patrick Mahomes' development. So he's seen a guy wait most of his rookie year. Patrick Mahomes only played in week 17 of that season. Basically took a redshirt year. Alex Smith was a starter. Took a redshirt year, and then, obviously the next year took off after that. But there's also the flip side of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll coming from Buffalo, where Josh Allen was supposed to sit. Their plan was Nathan Peterman as the starter, though.
Right, that went sideways quickly.
Stunning, that didn't work out, but he actually got injured in the first half of week 1, and Josh Allen ended up in the first half of week 1. And that's also worked. So I think there's people in the organization that have seen it both ways. They're open to however it kind of plays out. But I think in a perfect world, Jaxson Dart sits and they win some games with Russell Wilson and they're competitive. And then he comes in later in the season or, even just a game at the end of the season in a perfect world. But we all know.
That depends on wins.
Things never go as planned.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that depends. Like the Kansas City situation, they were winning games. They were a playoff team. They were a really good team. So I just look at that opening 3 games. It's Washington. I think it's the Cowboys, and then it's the Chiefs. Jordan, you've covered the team for years now. They start out 0-3. You're going to hear those calls on WFAN. You're going to hear those calls everywhere that, hey, where's Jaxson Dart? We want to see Jaxson Dart.
I'll take it one step even further. First 2 games, at Washington, at Dallas. They cannot start 0-2. Yeah. If they start 0-2, they're 0-2 then in the division, in the conference, and then they have Kansas City on deck at home. Like it'll be panic mode already. Everyone will be off. The season essentially will probably be lost. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about, I hear Giant fans all the time. No, you got to give Daboll more time. You got to give Shane more time. That's all well and good in August. That's all well and good, earlier in the season. When the bullets start flying in September and they start out 0-2 and you start looking at that schedule, I can't blame John Mara for starting to lose some patience.
I mean, you can't get blown out for the third straight year in the opener and get dominated either. Like that's just, who is that a reflection on if that happens?
It's on the coach, right? Or if it's not on the coach, then it's got to be on the GM, right? Either you're saying you have no talent and it's a GM problem, or there's enough talent and the coach is not getting it out of them.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. They have to play a strong game week one this year. They can't have just an absolute dud in week one and have to go to Dallas, where they, by the way, haven't beaten Dallas in 5 years. They lost 8 straight to the Dallas Cowboys. And Dak Prescott essentially has never lost. I think he lost to the Giants once when he was a rookie, right? I think that's it.
Yeah.
And so you are like, they need to come out of the gate strong this year, more so than ever. And like you said, this is the NFL. You can't keep producing poor results. They went 6-11. They went 3-14. I don't know how, and I get it. You don't want to have Jaxson Dart start over, have a new offense, a new coaching regime, start a new general manager, whatever it is. But you can't produce terrible results in the NFL. 6-11, 3-14, and let's say you go 5-12.
Yeah.
Like, that's a tough thing to pull up. Tom Coughlin almost got fired when he went 500 in year 3.
Yeah.
Right? He went 8-8 in year 3, and it made the playoffs the first 2 years. He almost got fired. He had a conversation with John Mara about getting fired after going 500 in year 3. We're talking about 6-11, 3-14, and another. Let's imagine another bad year. Like, it's hard in the NFL to survive that.
Gary Glanville's old line, right? NFL stands for not for long. If you're not winning games, and I can definitely see that narrative shifting with Giant fans very quickly. All right, let's talk a little bit about the offensive line. You mentioned it there before. It's been an issue here for a while. Is there any signs of hope that this year the offensive line is going to be at least like middle of the road?
All right, so take that magnifying glass, look really deep into last season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Andrew Thomas was healthy in those first 6 or 8 games, their offensive line was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They had definitely shown improvement. You have Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. Jermaine Illuminor is a quality right tackle. Like, that's a pretty good tackle duo. John Runyon Jr. at left guard. He's a quality player in this league, right? The other 2 spots, John Michael Schmidt at center, they need to play a little better. And Greg Van Roten is a veteran. You can kind of get by with that right guard. But those guys together again, I think that's the likelihood. It's going to be those guys starting again week 1. I know everyone's like, what about Evan Neal? What about Evan Neal? I don't know. I think they're going to end up trusting. I mean, this is my guess at this point. They're going to end up trusting Greg Van Roten a little more at this time. A veteran, just have some continuity there. That if they were average last year, let them play together, get them time together. You know, they can be a better than average group, above average group, which I think any Giant fan would take right now, right? An above average offensive line. And their specialty, they're probably better run blocking unit than they are pass blocking. So I think you're going to see a lot of a run heavy team this year. Russell Wilson dump, hit a deep ball. Like that's sort of, I think, the blueprint and the philosophy of this team this season. So, but it's all contingent on Andrew Thomas. Because you take Andrew Thomas out of there, he's the one high-end guy they have on that offensive line, right? Everyone else I just mentioned, okay, fine, well-quality NFL, proven NFL player, but not Pro Bowl, All-Pro type caliber player. He's the only one they have that is at that level. He's coming off Liz Frank surgery, a foot injury. He's had previous ankle problems, foot problems. Big guys with foot problems.
Yeah.
That concerns me sometimes long-term. It's hard with putting 300 pounds and pounding on that ankle or that foot constantly. So it's not a question to me about whether he's back for week 1. You know, I think they're going to ramp him up coming up soon, and he'll be back for week 1. It's, can he stay healthy for the season? And I don't know. You just have to cross your fingers at this point if you're the Giants.
What does the running game look like? I thought Tyrone Tracy had a nice rookie season last year. They draft Scattaboo in, I think it was the 3rd round. I don't know what round that was, but I know he's been a little bit banged up at camp. 4th round. Okay.
4th.
Do they look at him as a big piece? Is he is it 50-50? How do you think that the running back carries will break down?
Yeah, I don't know about 50-50. I still think that Tyrone Tracy is clearly the guy. A lot of people have been asking me this recently. I didn't realize that they thought like Cam Scatterbo was going to come in. Yeah, even when before he got banged up, he was only fitting in with the first team offense like one snap here or there. Like he wasn't really at that point yet where he was in that mix. I mean, I still think it's probably Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary, and then Cam Scatterbo looked like he was aligning for some sort of like maybe third down role, catches the ball really well out of the backfield, get him in some screens, get him in there for a couple carries here or there. But I didn't see him getting to the point yet where he was going to be like a 50-50 split with Tyrone Tracy, or even like a 60-40. To me, it was going to be more like a 70-30 or somewhere along those lines. But now he had this setback. He limped off the field the other day. I believe it's his hamstring. It looked like that's what he was favoring. And so now I think it's probably going to be a slower integration because now he's probably going to have to miss some time here. When he does come back, you have to be careful with hamstring injuries, right? So I think it might take a little time. But, by the middle of the season, I think Cam Scatterbo is going to be playing a significant role. Probably, little by little cut into that number that I mentioned before. But at this point, it's Tyrone Tracy's show. And not only is he going to run the ball a lot, he's going to catch the ball a ton because Russell Wilson, that's sort of his MO, right? Dump, 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 deep ball, deep ball, deep ball. The middle of the field's not, and the intermediate routes, that's not his strength. So I think he's actually going to be a bigger factor in the passing game than most people realize.
I asked you about the second first-round pick. What about the
Which for fantasy you like, Gordon?
Yes, exactly. Look, this is all shaded towards that angle. I was trying to disguise it a little bit, Jordan, but
no, I know where we're going here. And I like cheap catches. I don't care because if you're playing PPR, I don't care if he's catching 8 passes for 8 yards.
Right.
That's 4 points, baby.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I asked you about the second first-round pick. I didn't ask you about Abdul Carter yet. How's he looked so far, and where has he been lining up?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
You're going to see him used in different ways. I mean, he's a monster. He's going to be it looks like he should be a star in this league as long as he stays on track. The question is how they fit him in, and that's like you said, but they're going to find ways to fit him in, whether it's getting snaps on the edge, 3-man rotation there with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and him, maybe subbing in for those guys every few series, playing in pass rush situations and special packages on the interior as an off-ball linebacker. Like, you name it, he's probably going to be there, and they're going to find ways to get them all on the field together because he's going to be a major factor. Now, with that being said, that group is only going to be as good as they think it is if they can score points, right? You got to have the lead in order for them to do their damage, and B, they're going to have to stop the run, which that's still, even with their additions this offseason, has me a little concerned, the interior of that defensive line, and whether they're going to be able to stop the run consistently.
Yeah. Where do they look at outside of obviously Dex in terms of depth along that defensive line in the interior, which has been kind of an issue? Did they have pieces on the roster that are going to be able to make that work? Do they look to other teams when cut downs come along? How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, they signed Roy Robertson Harris this offseason, so they're asking him to play a big role. Jury's out on what he's going to actually contribute. Rakeem Nunez-Roches is still in that mix. Nacho, he's still a big part of that mix there. And then after that, it's like, somebody's got to step up. The preseason is probably going to be a big part of that evaluation for them. But you don't feel super confident. Obviously, this is all aside from Dexter Lawrence. We know what Dexter Lawrence brings to the table. Dude's a stud. He's an absolute star in the league. But they need those guys to play well around him. Jeremiah Ledbetter was a guy that they signed. He's been a run stuffer previously in his career, and he's basically playing with the third team. Darius Alexander, they drafted in the 3rd round. Very quiet camp, kind of got off to a slow start, was banged up in the spring. Haven't seen a ton from him yet. Might take him time to get acclimated to the NFL and play at that level. So I'm not sure what you're going to get from him right away. So they have major questions on the interior there still in my eyes.
What's if you're sitting here after the season's over and the Giants have had an acceptable year, whatever that is, 7 wins, 8 wins, whatever, what do you think has to go right early on for them to get off to at least a halfway decent start? Is there an X factor?
Run the football. I mean, that's how this team is going to keep these games close, right? They're not going to win shootouts. They bring back 10 of 11 starters from the 31st ranked scoring offense, Gordon.
Right.
Right. Run the ball and run it effectively to keep, the clock moving and the opposing defense on their heels. And then that in turn will allow their defense to be way more successful. So yeah, that's where their defense can shine. If they get in these shootouts or the offense isn't scoring points and they're trailing the whole time, it's going to be hard for the defense to show what they really have. Like, you can't put too much pressure on them. So to me, it's running the ball with Tyrone Tracy. Actually, I'm the more the summer goes along, the higher I'm getting on Tyrone Tracy.
I'm sensing that.
Yeah. I mean, if Cam Scatabo wasn't injured, I'd probably feel differently.
Yeah.
But a hamstring or a leg injury, a soft tissue injury in your leg, and even if it's a couple weeks here, it's just going to be a slow integration. That makes me more confident in Tyrone Tracy early in the season.
If the Giants, it always seems like, because they came in together, Schoen and Daboll, do you see them as linked if this thing goes sideways? Or is it possible that, it seems like Schoen is in a more stable footing than Daboll would be? It's a coaching league. Coaches change more often. Do you see those two guys linked if things go sideways? Or could you see a separation between the head coach and the GM?
Originally, I did think they were linked. The more you sit here and you watch, and John Mara, we actually asked him this. I think it was not this year, it was last year. And he absolutely said absolutely not, that they're not linked. Like, they're two separate jobs and they're evaluated separately. So that I'm taking him for his word on that and saying, you know what, even though it would make sense for them to be linked, John Mara said they're not linked. And plus, the Giants haven't exactly operated smoothly for the last decade. Like, I shouldn't just assume it doesn't make sense that they're not. No, the Giants have done some really dumb things, right? Like, rolling. I don't even want to get into it, but they've done some things with building their team. You're like, what are we doing here? Like, everyone knew you didn't need to. You don't even need to second guess it. You first guessed it. So yeah, I fully put it on the table now that Brian Daboll's probably would be more on the hot seat than Joe Schoen, and they would split them up, and they would do things that, Gordon, tell me where it works, right? You see the Jets. These are the kinds of things the Jets do, the Bears do, like these other teams that haven't been very successful for a really long time. So, but is it on the table for them? Why should I discount it? Right? Yeah. They've been that bad, and John Mara said they're not linked.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. I think probably should be. It wouldn't make any sense to get rid of one and not the other, and then you're all mismatched and you're going through that whole mess again, like you've seen it a gazillion times. And
I just wonder, because drafting the quarterback in the first round, you kind of mentioned it a little bit before. The last thing you want to do is, after that kid gets drafted, then the next year bring in a new coach. So that might give him some shelf life. What would be your expectations for this season for the Giants? Another top 10 draft pick, or at least holding their own in the NFC East?
Yeah, I mean, I think I picked 6 wins, so they're right in that, mix of being in the top 10 of the draft. It's just a tough schedule. I'm not ultimately convinced the Russell Wilson experiment's going to work out. This is kind of the MO he's had every team he went. He gets everybody all excited. He says all the right things. But the reality is he's not the same quarterback he was when he was younger. Like, can he be a effective quarterback at times? Absolutely. But he's not a guy that puts you on his shoulders anymore and says, "Oh no, come on, I'll make plays. I'll take you with me." So it's hard for me to see this team. The only blueprint for them to win a lot of games is, like I said, run the ball, play good defense, keep the game close, win all these tight games, which is really tough to do. You need everything to go in your favor, like it did in 2022 for the Giants, and they made the mistake of thinking they were better than they are. But I think the likelihood is, sometimes some of these games will go in their favor. They'll win 6-7 games, somewhere in that range, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, is there a number in your mind that they have to get to for the coach to be safe?
That's a really loaded question, because it's not. John Mara says he needs to feel better about the direction of the team when he walks off the field in the final game of the season, right? Or feel good about where the team is headed. There's a lot of things that can
happen.
With
Jaxson Dart, I mean, if you get 6 with Jaxson Dart, I think that accomplishes that.
Exactly. That's why I said it's a loaded question, because a lot of that has to do with the quarterback. If you feel really good about the quarterback, hey, if we get him in there, like, yeah, we didn't win a lot of games this year, but we saw flashes of him being good. And if we get him in there next year, that's going to be the piece that elevates us to be a playoff/Super Bowl contender. Like, that's all it takes. So it's hard for me to really sit here, and people always try to get me to say a number. I think it's so much more about what happens with their competitiveness and then Jaxson Dart than it is an actual number of wins.
Jordan, thank you so much for this time. And I'm sure the Giants, they might not be interesting during the season, but they keep it interesting in some ways, right? Like, there's always storylines. So I'm sure we'll talk again fairly soon.
Yeah, sounds good, Gordon. Yep. Oh, there's always something, especially when there's going to be potential quarterback changes, calls for the quarterback. Like, that's going to be that's the question all year. I get the number one question again. When's Jaxson Dart going to play? So I'll talk to you next time when you want to ask me that.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. I didn't mention it in the beginning. I figured you'd know it by now. If you've not already, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to or watching it. We are now on YouTube, Gordon Damer on Sports. Hit that subscribe button, leave a review, hit a comment, hit a couple of buttons. It really does help out the podcast. And we will be back next week. More guests, more shows, only here on Gordon Damer on Sports.